This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, News Free Dixie for the 21st century.
Well, Judge, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, Judge Brown, how you doing tonight?
All right, young man.
Yeah. I just want to get your take about what's going on right now in the news cycle, about what's going on with Trump and our policy, like the so-called Muslim ban, among other things. Just want to get your take on it because people have been requesting that I talk to you and to get your input on it because you got a lot of wisdom and a unique perspective on things.
Okay, my first reaction is something that we ought to look at. He looks like the Energizer Bunny, doesn't
he? Yeah.
That's what Obama should have been doing, but did not. You see, we got him in 2008. The Democrats controlled the House of Representatives and the Senate. Anything that the Democrats wanted could have been done. They needed some leadership. Did he do it? No. You got Obamacare, but that was drafted by Tennessee U.S. Senator Bill Frist, who at the time was Republican Senate Majority Leader. His family started Blue Cross Blue Shield and most of these medical insurance companies and HMOs, and his family's got a killing off of Obamacare, which is not good for ordinary black people or much of anybody else either. Then there was the Economic Incentive Plan, which is the largest single expenditure in the history of the United States, $781 billion. It didn't go to us. It didn't do anything about education, putting people back to to work, guaranteeing new jobs, training. It didn't do any of that. It went to high finance and investment banking. So we got nothing out of 8 years of somebody that looked like a black president. I'm even laughing. Trump's executive order to change Black History Month to Afro-American History Month. It's like, wow, Hey, I'll pay more attention to what's being current for black folk than the colored boy did.
Wow.
See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't make me any difference one way or the other. Frankly, I think considering Barack Obama, perhaps rather than using the term of African American, we need to go back to Afro American or black. But that begs the point, hey, he couldn't even do something in a little housekeeping bit like that. Change the name that started off from what used to be Negro History Week.
Mm-hmm.
After a Negro History Day, I guess it was unofficial, 40-some years ago, nobody looked at it. You see all of this he's done about jumping into foreign policy and, contacting by phone all of the international leadership one way or the other. Do you think Obama did that? No. Obama wouldn't even talk to the Black Caucus. They used to complain about, along with the Democratic Caucus, we don't know what the Democratic president wants. We have to look at CNN to find out what he's up to. We can't get it. You see. So just take a look at that by comparison so you can see how it's supposed to be done, even if what is being done is not to your pleasure. That's the main message out of that. It's just we get deceived by appearances too much. It wasn't the white man that thwarted a whole lot of these slave uprisings and black folk trying to get the rights together after the Civil War. It was some ill-begotten coward of a colored person who was going down and, boss, let me tell you what the niggers up to today. They's plotting, boss, sure is. See, and we don't do ourselves justice sometimes. But it's interesting what you're looking at.
I mean, it begs the question, does he ever sleep?
Don't you think it would have been nice if the first colored-looking somebody in the White House didn't sleep much and paid attention to business?
I definitely would. I mean, it's like it really begs to compare. I mean, like it's crazy because I gotta respect Trump because he's doing everything he said he was going to do on the campaign trail, or he's attempting to do everything, and I gotta respect that, regardless if I agree with it.
And what did we get from Obama? And what was Hillary Clinton promising? Hillary Clinton talked a whole lot of smack that when you looked at it and analyzed it, it said nothing. It was just parlor talk at a nice little wine and cheese tasting affair.
And you know what's crazy? Yeah, you know what's crazy too? Because I know I'll talk to some black people and there's a lot of black folks don't like Trump. It's some that, they like him a little bit. But my thing is, I heard black folks saying, well, Obama couldn't do certain things because he might get killed. I said, why be president if you're not willing to risk your life?
Yeah,
for what you want.
You can't take the heat, get the hell out of the kitchen.
Right.
Well, all of these black folk who sacrificed one way or another over the last, centuries. I don't want no half-stepping Negro worried about his life.
Right.
He's killed enough people with these drones around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Judge.
No, I wasn't gonna say anything. It's just, hey, that's not an excuse. That's just colored boy weren't boss. I sure don't want you white folk getting mad at us. You sure be nice. I don't want them Klan boys coming around and burning nobody, lynching nobody. We good niggas. We got good relations with white. You tell them Klan boys that we're good niggas.
Well, actually, Judge Brown, like, it's interesting, Donald Trump's fixation on Chicago. Like, Barack Obama claims that's his hometown, but he only brings up Chicago when the Cubs win the World Series or something like that. But
yeah, it's a shame. He was not. See, that man was not connected with the cities of America because he did not grow up in mainland America.
Mm-hmm.
The first time he set foot in an inner city, he was about his mid-20s, and that was because he was living in a high-rise on the Loop downtown Chicago, working a hell of a lucrative job at a place his daddy controlled.
Mm.
And he'd had limited contact with the black folk in Chicago. And he sounds a nice game, but he's like an actor, a chick flick matinee star. And see, what did we have on the other hand? We had a nice little wannabe upper middle class witchlet who wanted to do what? Wine and cheese and gossip with the ladies and get real nasty toward men.
Mm.
And that's what was running as an alternative. They beat down Bernie Sanders, and I won't forget this. See, back in the 60s, Hillary Clinton and her parents were living in suburban Illinois outside of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They were protesting and really up in arms about black people moving out there.
Right.
In fact, they moved to upstate New York. She was a Republican campaigning for that racist Barry Goldwater, who was pulling the race card out from the bottom of the deck and dealing it face up so you could see it. And then campaigning for Richard Tricky Dick, I am not a crook Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders was chairman of the core chapter in, suburban Chicago. And he was going to jail trying to get integration in housing, both for the University of Chicago and for ordinary people. Meanwhile, Hillary was opposing it. But you see, we have such short memories or don't even know to begin with, aren't interested. We were unaware of it.
What about John Lewis, though, who was there? And how he looked, he's stomping hard, for Hillary and stuff. Like, he didn't want to go to the inauguration, even though he was elected by the people.
Oh, give me a break. He went to Reagan's inauguration. And if there was one racist SOB who did a whole lot of damage and the people loved him for it, it's St. Ron the Reagan.
Mm.
He went to George Wacko Bush's inauguration. And if there's one sorry wacko moron, That's George W. Bush.
Mm.
He went to George Herbert Walker Bush's inauguration. So give me a break. You don't have to go around acting like you're Hillary Clinton's Kotex, though I guess she doesn't have that problem anymore at her age.
Yeah, I heard it. Hey, do you ever hear the rumor about Obama? You say he was a matinee chick flick idol. I heard that the actor Harry Lennox Jr., who was in the Five Heartbeats and the Superman movies, you know what I'm talking about, that actor on the Blacklist?
No, I don't.
He's a light-skinned brother. They said that he was hired to be Obama's acting coach back in the 90s to teach him how to act presidential. Like some government agency hired him.
Yeah. And Reverend White was approached about Obama being in his congregation so he could sound preachy. Did you ever notice how when Obama was in a one-on-one discussion or something and it wasn't a speech, he stuttered and stammered?
Right. He does it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. When it was a speech, he could just flow. Well, he picked up on how to make those black preachy speeches. But the reality is something else. A speech is one thing. Intimate awareness of the intricate details of something is a totally different thing. I'm bad-mouthing the brother because, first off, he only looked like us. He was not one of us. You know, you can't be one of us if you don't have mama or daddy, grandmama, relatives or whatever who went through our experience.
Mm.
I mean, you can come in straight from Africa. If you went through, you know, the bush experience out there, you know, tribal or whatever, you can understand. But he didn't go through that.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up as extremely rich, spoiled, rich kid.
Right.
In one of the richest families on earth.
But they act like he had student loan debt, though. There's some problem. Like they act like
he did not.
Okay.
He did not. Stepdaddy paid for every damn thing, or his adopted daddy.
But why won't fake news tell the truth about the real narrative about Barack Hussein Obama then, if that's the case? Because they're like he just a rag to riches story. That's how they present him.
They have blinders.
Mm-hmm.
They ought to go do a report on the trust fund he is a 1/3 beneficiary of out of Indonesia that his adoptive daddy, Lolo Sotoro, left him beneficiary of.
Right.
See, they don't cover this.
Mm-hmm.
See, the news media is into entertainment, not information.
Right.
They present it like it's tabloid journalism, like it's the back page, last section of the newspaper where they used to confine the gossip column. See, some other stuff, it doesn't even have to deal with black folk now, or him. Like, look at the Bush thing. The impression you got through the media is that George W. Bush was a flunky for Dick Cheney because Dick Cheney was the big-time executive for Halliburton, right?
Right.
Truth of the matter is Bush's uncle founded Halliburton. George Herbert Walker founded Halliburton in 1946 in Oklahoma. It had been chartered in 1919 as an energy development company, but it went defunct. So Uncle Herbie rechartered it in 1946. Halliburton is a Bush-Walker family enterprise. Dick Cheney worked for the Bush family.
Mm.
But you don't cover that. Or how about this one? Speaking of Dick Cheney, CNN touched on it as a little lightly amusing thing, but it's serious. You know, Warren Buffett, Dick Cheney, and Barack Obama are blood kin.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Along with Brad Pitt.
Right. That's funny, ain't it? And Lyndon B. Johnson and Harry Truman, too, right? I mean, it's related to Obama that they say.
No, not they. I didn't see Harry Truman or any of that, but it's just interesting. You see, that's through his white side. You see how all of that goes, and his grandmother is executive vice president of a bank that we now discover through release of documents was in charge of disbursement of the CIA covert funds in the Southwest Pacific, which included Indonesia.
Hmm. This is crazy. So you think they have a secret family reunion or something? that we don't know
Well,
about?
they're supposed, the Bushes and the Sotoros are supposed to be family friends.
Mm. Yeah, because George H.W. Bush was CIA director. So that would make sense.
Yeah, and Lolo Sotoro ran the death squads for the Indonesian army.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow.
So you need muscle, you need a hit, subcontract to the Indonesians, and guess who's in charge? Lolo Sotoro, who also happened to be International Executive Vice President for Standard Oil. That's Exxon's predecessor.
They say, behind every great wealth, there's a great crime. And, it's funny with Obama because he, like you say, he got that movie star quality. He was a real celebrity president, him and his family. But people think that is he really a nice guy? I mean, can you really be nice and rise to the top like that in that short period of time? You got to be ruthless, right?
Well, if you did it yourself, yeah. But if you got picked as a figurehead like Ronald Reagan did, it doesn't make any difference as long as you go for the flow. Think about it. Take Al Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
What does he say? Oh, never ask me about my business again.
Right.
He's the gangster, the Godfather.
That's right.
But he played the big sissy in that movie about Liberace.
Mm-hmm.
So which is it, the big sissy or the gangster? He played Scarface. Hey, say hello to my little friend, And he opens up with the grenade launcher on the M4.
Right.
So which one is he? The Cuban drug lord, the mafia gangster, or the sissy in Liberace? Or he plays one where he plays the devil.
Right.
So which one is he? It doesn't make any difference. He's an actor. He plays a role.
Right.
If you bring somebody else in who's willing to do it, you have a figurehead. Look at Ronald Reagan. I saw Ronald Reagan back in 1968 when we picketed him over 2 consecutive days, make 3 speeches. And each of them, he said he forgot his written speech. He made the same big show of trying to find it. Then he said he had to wing it. And then in the course of the speech, he coughed the same place, stumbled, told the audience, I'm winging it, and then dropped his pen the same place in each speech. And we said, this isn't a speech writer. This is a script writer who wrote the script. I've talked to people drinking whiskey with him who worked around him when he was in the White House. Said they never met the president. They met the individual identified as Ronald Reagan, but he was so brain dead, demented, he couldn't have been the president. He'd always be asking for jelly beans, and they'd tell him to hush. Somebody get him some more jelly beans while they talk to the French ambassador or something.
So he really already had advanced dementia at that point.
Yes. And plus, I read a book. It's called The Inside Track. I read the book in 1966. It was assigned as a reading assignment for a political science class. In that, they had a group composed of gangsters, industrialists, and the leftovers from the Hitler Youth movement prior to World War II in America. 3 of the big movers were involved in California. 2 of them went to UCLA. Both of them in 1949, according to the plot line, were supposed to have tried to influence a student election and gotten suspended for a year, and then coming back, one of them attempted to embezzle student funds and was expelled. Turns out during the Watergate thing, that was Eichmann, Ehrlichman, and Haldeman. They'd gone to UCLA to match that profile.
Wow.
Well, they were trying to figure out how to run the country. So they were going to figure out who they were going to pick as a politician. Somebody said it didn't make any difference. Let's get an actor. Nobody wants to elect an actor. Well, we could make that happen because he doesn't have to be a real live ego. We can script him. And they described somebody that obviously was John Wayne, but they were talking about he had lung cancer. Turned out, find out in 1969 he had lung cancer, but this was 1966. They were talking about, can you get Nixon? But at that time, most people don't know it. Nixon was convicted of a felony offense of attempting to alter an election outcome in California when he ran for governor in 61 or 60. But he'd been put on diversion and his record had been expunged. And then they picked somebody that was supposed to be the secretary of the Screen Actors Guild. And they talked about how he had informed on people during that red baiting scare in the early 60s, late 50s, and how they could get him elected U.S. Senator, and then run him for president, get him elected in 1984, going along with the Orwell thing. But they wound up getting Ronald Reagan, who had been president of the Screen Actors Guild. They get him in as governor in 1968, and then he becomes president in 1980. That's who they were talking about. See, that's just the book, but I read it in 1966.
Wow.
It's called The Inside Track, if you can find it. I don't know who the writer was or who published it.
I'm definitely going to try to find that book. Wow.
But now, see, there are all kinds of things going on. So you have to be aware of what you pay attention to and what the media is doing. Remember, the truth. Tell a lie long enough, loud enough, you can get anybody to believe it. And then, as Lincoln said, you can fool most of the people most of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time.
Well, actually, this. I mean, speaking about the media, I think about this alt-right media, and I think about Steve Bannon being appointed to a national security role. Is he like a Goebbels on steroids or something? Or who is he? What is this about? What's your opinion of him and what he represents?
It's just their propaganda need. They need their propaganda too. And the thing about the right wing, the neocon, and you see that in right-wing talk shows that you don't see in middle-of-the-road talk shows. The right-wing talk shows are to a great extent designed so you can keep telling the right wing why they hold to their opinions. Because they say, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense. Oh, and then you hear a right-wing talk show, one of these shock jobs. And go, oh, that's why. See, they have to keep reminding themselves of the propaganda line. And the other thing is, too, the so-called right-wing intellectuals fervently believe in such nonsense as intelligent design, and there is no such thing as global warming. That's all a myth by tree huggers. They're crackpots. They aren't very well educated, even if they went to a big school. They didn't pay attention to what was going on, and they're not well rounded. They're sharply focused on making money, or they may be ideologues, or like Brexit. You know, the interesting thing about Brexit is we know the principal players as far as the American part of Brexit goes, but the London editor of Brexit is a Muslim, and he met with Trump and Trump Towers 2 or 3 weeks before he was sworn in. So anti-Muslim, why is he meeting with a Muslim editor of his favorite little right-wing journal? You see, all kinds of things behind the tail, the story. We went into this thing about Saudi Arabia. Probably the next high king of Saudi Arabia. The gentleman in question is a native-born American citizen who grew up in the United States and went to public school from kindergarten through grad school, and actually is eligible to run for U.S. president, but he's likely to be Saudi high king.
Wow.
Saudi, the Americans, real oil companies, a real big favor. There was a glut in oil, but Saudi, at a great loss, just kept dumping oil into the system, which the American oil companies, along with the English BP, acquired great stocks of it at very low prices. And now that they've ramped up the cost of oil, the American oil companies and BP are going to try to move all the stuff they've stockpiled at a low price at the current high price. And they're already trying to ramp up the price at the pump.
Mm-hmm.
But the oil that is subject to the new prices still has 79 or so more days before it gets to the U.S. It takes that long to ship it. So you see, it's a big game because the American public likes to watch Major League Baseball, the World Series, the Super Bowl's coming up, the NBA, NHL, everything but the stuff that influences. And see, said it more than 2,000 years ago. I think the Latin is "Donne fande isticelsia," give them bread and circus, and they won't care what you do. Feed them and entertain them. And as fat as everybody's getting, we sure are well fed, I would say.
Right.
And we certainly have enough entertainments between getting it on your devices, Comcast, Xfinity, DirecTV, Dish, and all the rest of them.
Wow.
So we're entertained. We get nonsense, and CNN, basically, jokingly, what is that? Confusion National Network.
Well, I was thinking about that Dakota pipeline, the Keystone pipeline stuff, and I did not know until recently. I don't know if you told me or somebody told me that Susan Rice and her husband got investments in that pipeline thing.
Yes, all of them are interconnected.
Wow.
Or they have businesses that they have a big interest in, or somebody they know will cut them in on it when they get through or after they're out of the office. The big thing nowadays is after somebody's out of office, you award them by sending them on a speaking tour with humongous fees, and in a few months they get 10, 15 million out of it.
Mm-hmm.
He got Hillary on the cheap. She reported 13, but the Russian released emails show she got 26 million. She lied about it. So you give somebody $26 million in 14, 15 months, you own them.
Wow. Let me ask you, is the Clinton Foundation over with since they can't deliver on those promises after those big donations?
They're still operating.
Okay.
And they're still well and surely hated and hated for what they did there. It's all propaganda. It looks good. But, the Clintons, Bill was a decent president. He was necessary in the midst of that run from St. Ron to Reagan and, George Herbert Walker Bush with his mediocre self. You needed that break. Then Gore lost out to George Wacko, and that was bad. That was 8 years of that. And then you got 8 years of Obama, who basically took the Bush policies and chiseled them in stone. So you got to look at what somebody really does rather than just what they talk about.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
Now you got Trump, and Mr. T gave the Clintons recently, in the last 10 years, $100,000 some dollars. And they hung out together. The families did.
Well, they say that Trump and Hillary are related too. That they related.
It might be. So I get the impression that a lot of what you see is really the equivalent of pro wrestlers bad mouthing each other about how the hooded crusader is going to jack up Satan's disciple.
Right.
And you got a tag team match, and Mr. Death is going to bring on the Scythe Man, and blah, blah, blah. Bobby, I want you to know I'm going to take his head off. He's a coward. He won't get anywhere near the ring with me. He's a punk, and I'm going to whip his behind. You wait. And me and the Cape Crusader, we're going to sit there and jack him up. Blah, blah,
right.
blah, blah, blah. And it's all choreographed.
Like you said, it's bread and circuses. That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what you're getting right now is somebody that's telling you exactly what you want to hear if you're on that good old boy side. I don't know if it's going to be what he wants to ultimately put in place, but there is a real need for some reform in the government. And there is so much that is out of phase with the current realities. I noticed, for example, he put a freeze on hiring in the Pentagon for civilian employees.
Right.
So I'm interested to see how that's supposed to go out. You can look at small stuff, and you have to know where to get it. They just had an XM17 competition for the last 3 years on getting a replacement pistol for the Beretta M9.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the military said the pistols are wearing out. We've had them for 30 years. They lack some features, and to upgrade them would cost more than getting brand new pistols.
Right.
So they wound up picking a Sig Sauer 320 primarily for a strange reason. It fit women's hands. Now, it's interesting when military equipment is dictated by how well it works with women. You kind of say, that's a little strange. Not necessarily the best, but does it work with women? And then the whole concept of women toting guns in a combat zone, that's kind of, okay, oh, yeah, where are we going with this? That's the new world order, I guess it is. Then you wound up with a thing that even Barack vetoed. Some characters wanted to resurrect the 1911, but instead of paying a cost to the Pentagon, like 180, 190 to get one of the more modern pistols, they were paying out $1,400 to get a 100-year-old pistol that's what? Over heavy, jam prone, and using an ammunition that's no longer stockpiled. So, it's kind of like, let's see if you can cut down on some of the unnecessary expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see what he does. I don't like his pick for attorney general. Everybody that I know that's had contact with him thinks he's a racist SOB.
Mm-hmm.
But then, they put it out. He's got impeccable credentials. Well, some of the worst racists that sat on the bench here in Shelby County had impeccable credentials.
Mm-hmm.
But, I guess you could say that same thing about those clowns down at juvenile court. They've got impeccable credentials, but that is a farce down there. Racist, biased, bigoted, and out to make money off of black kids and families. So, it all depends on how you talk it. You look at Obama's thing, he had 3 shots at the Supreme Court, and his last nominee didn't make it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But that man was a lifetime Republican and had a long record of being anti-affirmative action. So what were we getting out of it? And the 2 women he put on it, they're nondescript. Nobody's just, I guess they have feminine genders, so they got put on there. And one of the big problems with the whole Supreme Court is that it needs to be leavened out with common sense. In other words, people put on there who actually have dealt with people law, who have an understanding of how this stuff affects ordinary Americans, black, white, brown, red, yellow, instead of just being interested in whether it helps out a corporation or it advances some crank ideology. They talked about how brilliant Scalia is, but if you really read his opinions, they were like crank opinions. One in particular dealt with search and seizure, and it was that if law enforcement desires, they can say stop a Greyhound bus and demand that all of the passengers allow their luggage to be searched without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. And if they don't, the luggage and the passenger can be removed from the conveyance. Well, that was a very bad decision, and we had a problem with that here in Tennessee. Some Democratic sheriffs and some Republican sheriffs during the next gubernatorial election, started pulling over campaign buses from the opposite party and removing everybody from the bus if they didn't agree to having their purses and all belongings just searched for no cause. So you see, the Tennessee Supreme Court, I guess, had to put a stop to that using Tennessee law. And right now, state judges all across the country don't rely on the U.S. Constitution because, as interpreted, it gives very little protection to ordinary citizens.
Mm.
You know, you think of constitutional law, you think of people's rights, but the way constitutional law is dealt with now is interstate transportation situations where there are conflicts of law involving the shipping line. You know, which one do you use? So there's very little people law coming out of this Supreme Court. So you could have put a black man on there your first, couple of years to offset Uncle Thomas, the house Negro.
Right.
I suppose slaves need a representative, even though there shouldn't have been any around for 150 some years, but I guess you got Uncle Clarence up there. He's probably the most right-wing neocon one on the whole court.
Mm.
I guess he doesn't know what to do now that Scalia is gone. He always rode on Scalia's coattails.
Mm-hmm.
He was good to protect the Second Amendment, but that's about all. Same with Scalia.
Wow. Let me ask you this about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to ask you this about the so-called Muslim ban that people talk about. What happened this past weekend at the airport. What is your take on that? The so-called Muslim ban.
Very bad. See, if you backed off and you looked at the rest of the world, let's say you're from the People's Republic of China,
mm-hmm.
where they don't have any religion over there, they'd look at it and say, well, you know what? If he wanted to talk about terrorists, why doesn't he ban Christians? They tend to cause more violence around the world than any other religion.
Mm.
They started the Crusades, which nobody has gotten over in the Middle East after 1,000 years. They're the ones that persecuted all the Jews. Adolf Hitler and the boys were Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all of what they did in World War II. Look at what they did to American blacks. What did they burn in your backyard? A cross, for goodness sakes.
Mm.
The biggest terrorist act outside of 9/11 in American history was good old Christian, good old boy Timothy McVeigh blew up a courthouse in Oklahoma City, not with any advanced weaponry, but with the most frequently used fertilizer, industrial grade fertilizer in the country. Ammonium nitrate synthesized with dirty engine oil. And it turns out to be a bit more powerful pound for pound than TNT. So, let's get real. Black community, I know some black preachers don't want to have anything to do with the Nation of Islam, but every time there's a problem out there in the neighborhood, it's not the preachers getting their congregation out there doing something about it. It's the local Nation of Islam guys that are doing it. Like some years ago, they had a bunch of little black girls were getting kidnapped and raped on the way home from school. So was it the deacon board that got people out there? No, it was the Nation of Islam that had people out there patrolling the neighborhoods, and whatever or whoever was doing it stopped.
Mm.
So, it's like you got to pay attention to what you're up to. So I think it's a very bad thing, but it panders to his group. He promised he's going to do it. Whether it becomes effective or not, whether it has a backlash that comes about in what happens in the Middle East, which I suspect will be the case, whether it energizes radical Islam to take action further against the United States, I suspect will be the case. This thing about the fence going along the Mexican border, a fence is a fence. it can always be breached. The main problem with the drug smuggling is the tunnels that they can quickly dig through the type of soil in question. Starts in the basement of a building half mile inside the Mexican side of the border. It comes out 2 miles inside the United States. And they're building those things left and right. Just takes a few months to build one.
Mm.
So what's the effect? The Mexican government has told us to get screwed. But see, I imagine he'll be able to say to his boys, well, I tried. The Republican Party isn't exactly on good terms with Donald Trump either. He came in as an independent and co-opted him like Bernie was trying to do with the Democrats. But the Democrats had this screwball superdelegate thing they put in place a decade ago for the specific purpose of getting Hillary Clinton in there. They wanted a woman at all costs, whatever her suitability for the office. And they're talking about Michelle Obama for 2020. Oh, please, give me a break. Forget what your gender is, who's effective. They better be talking about finding another Al Gore or perhaps General Wesley Clark or somebody.
That'd be interesting. You know what is the take on the fact that, or they said that Obama's administration put together that ban list, the 7 countries that Donald Trump is currently banning? That it was the Obama administration idea.
Yes. And then look at something. Everybody claps their hands about they killed bin Laden with SEAL Team 6.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that SEAL Team 6 was a little smarter than that, and they accidentally killed him. If you went over there with the intent of killing bin Laden, that's one of the dumbest things I can think of. If they can get his body out of there, they could have gotten him out of there, which means you've got a grand theft intelligence coup. You could have kept him on board an aircraft carrier and interrogated him for months and nobody would have known.
Mm-hmm.
But why would you shoot the man at the top? Just think about all of the information you could get from the top dog.
But what if he was already working for us, though? I mean, he was trained by the CIA, right? For the 80s in Afghanistan, Russia.
To see what was going on is before that, you get bin Laden's name coming up in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was about was arranging the transfer of the engineering plans on nuclear weapons to Pakistan, which may explain why they knew he was there. I'm sure they did.
Mm-hmm.
But he brought them the plans for the nukes, and that was at the behest of the U.S. government because they wanted Pakistan to set off against India, who had nukes. So then you've got that thing with plausible deniability with the Reagan administration and Ollie North, who ought to be in jail for disobeying the law. He says it was to uphold the flag, not the Constitution, which is foolish because the flag's just a symbol of the Constitution. But the name that was coming up over and over again was Osama bin Laden arranged the exchanges of money for the Stinger missiles and other weaponry that went to the Taliban's predecessor, predecessors of the Taliban who were fighting the Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get yourself involved in a dumb situation where the Soviet Union was over there for 8 years and just spun its wheels. So we are over there now for 16 years and can't get out. Longest war in the country's history. Just think about it. And then you want to talk about the mess. You see, there's that tea thing. Why do you have Afghanistan as a problem? It's because Britain almost went broke back in the 1700s, and we got free because they were, at least the country did, by buying tea for gold. So the U.S., Great Britain, France took up the idea that you would grow opium or produce opium in northern India, which is now, guess what, Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And you could take the opium over to China, sell the opium for gold, and then trade the gold for tea. That's why you have those clipper ships like on the front of Cutty Sark whiskey. The clipper ship or the Flying Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And see, opium dens. That used to be the plague of China. Well, guess who set the opium dens up? United States and England. So you could deliberately addict Chinese to opium so they would pay gold for the drug and we could get tea. And then to get some Earl Grey tea and little baby fingers stuck up, I'll have tea. I won't even come near the stuff. Black folks could drink enough iced tea. Sweetened. I want sweet iced tea, please. Sweet tea. Come on. You're backing up what used to be a drug trade that got millions of people addicted to opium. That's so you can drink stuff.
Franklin Roosevelt's grandfather was a big time drug dealer in opium lord, Warren Delano Jr. That's how he made the family fortune.
And an uncle he had was a big time Confederate agent who refused to take the Pledge of Allegiance. And he snuck in and out of America all the way through him dying in the early 20th century.
Right.
Now, Teddy Roosevelt's favorite uncle.
Mm-hmm.
He played with teddy bears, black kids do. But Teddy Roosevelt was one of the biggest racists going.
So you say that Donald Trump is a white nationalist, and was Teddy Roosevelt a white nationalist?
I'm not saying he's a white nationalist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that what he's doing is he's playing to an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people again don't like to look at history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what Trump's going to do because he hasn't been in there too much yet.
They did a lot of stuff already in 2 weeks.
Which Barack Obama should have done in 8 years, but
right. Mm-hmm.
Or at least the opposite if necessary. But I keep thinking about Lyndon Baines Johnson, who's probably done more for black people than any other American president.
Yes.
Except perhaps Lincoln, maybe, indirectly. And, he's the one that put Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
All these black federal judges for the first time in 100 years.
Mm.
But he started off as a big racist, or at least he played it.
Mm-hmm.
But an interesting thing that I did not grasp until I studied him, he would not have been elected U.S. Congressman for the first time, but for this one interesting fact. And few people know that he volunteered to be a school teacher in some schools that were completely segregated for Mexicans only. The Mexicans couldn't go to the white schools.
Mm-hmm.
So LBJ volunteered as a young man to teach in the Mexican schools. So later on, when he ran for Congress, he got a lot of Mexican support and got elected.
Mm.
But he campaigned on being a bigoted, anti-black Southerner.
Mm.
But when he got in, he gave that speech. He said, I'm going to represent all of the people. I'm going to surprise a lot of individuals who think I'm going to continue to be a racist bigot. I may be, but I'm trying not to act like it.
And also, his relationship with the Speaker of the House, who's from Tennessee but had Texas roots, Sam Rayburn. I thought that was fascinating with Sam Rayburn, the Speaker of the House, at the time when Lyndon B. Johnson's closest associates.
Yeah, but let's take another something. Prescott Bush,
mm-hmm.
The Republican senator whose father, George Herbert Walker Bush.
Right.
Well, Prescott Bush held the senatorial position that got filled by guess who? John F. Kennedy.
Mm.
And guess what else Prescott did? He's the one that backed up Truman signing Executive Order 1981 that integrated the armed services. See what a president can do with an executive order?
Yep.
And he also, by the way, was surety on most of the bonds that they put up for Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights era.
What about his Nazi connection, though?
Yeah, but you see, look at his grandson, George Wacko Bush.
Uh-huh.
But then look at George Wacko Bush.
Okay.
He made General Colin Powell Secretary of State.
And also he signed
Condoleezza Rice, and et cetera, et cetera.
MLK Memorial, right? And the African American Museum was on his watch. Did he do that? Did he sign those things to be?
Yeah, and
So that's
see,
fascinating, man.
also look at this.
Mhm.
2007,
Mhm.
there was a joint resolution in the House and in the U.S. Senate to have the president posthumously pardon Jack Johnson, the black world heavyweight champion.
That's right.
The first one that had gotten convicted for transporting his own wife across the corner of Georgia. She was white.
Mhm.
They put him in the penitentiary.
Mhm.
Every single U.S. congressman voted for it. Every single U.S. senator but one voted for it. Dick Cheney signed as United States Vice President in his position as President Pro Tem of the Senate. He signed it, and George Bush had a ceremony signing the pardon. You know, the only one person in U.S. government that didn't vote for it? Barack Obama. He was present and abstained.
Mm.
See, you got to realize that very few of these people that you get right now are actually giving you their true agenda. Now, this is a Judge Joe Brown pearl here.
Mhm.
Check it out. The Democratic Party has been trying to get us to buy into the sugar plum fairy. And the Republican Party has been trying to get us to buy into fearless leader.
Mhm.
Well, the sugar plum fairy is unreal, as is fearless leader. And the first doesn't have the magic wand, and the second is likely to be too stupid to do it in today's world.
Mm.
So sugar plum fairy or fearless leader. That's your choice between what the parties are trying to offer you or have been.
Mhm.
Now Trump came in, and it's like you get this image of these English hunters who have on the red coats and the white pants and high boots, riding the fine horses and a pack of hounds chasing down the foxes.
Mhm.
Well, it's like Trump is one of the hunters on horseback, and Hillary and most of the Democrats are like the hounds running along to the ground.
Wow. Oh,
Would you rather have a lap dog or the master? You know, that's kind of what you got choice. So he's talking a good game, but some of his selections aren't the best. The U.S. Attorney General, that's pathetic. This guy for the U.S. Supreme Court is supposed to have impeccable credentials, but so are some of the worst racists that have ever been on a Shelby County bench here locally have had impeccable credentials.
What about the Secretary of Education, DeVos, who was confirmed the other day?
What's her name?
DeVos. That's her name, DeVos. She's married to a guy whose father founded Amway and owned Orlando Magic.
I know her personally.
Bessie DeVos, right?
Want to hear something interesting?
Yeah.
She went over to my house for dinner.
You serious? Yeah, you are serious. Why I'm judging? Well, who is she? What's your take on her? Is she a good fit for Secretary of Education?
Let me say this.
Mm-hmm.
She always volunteered for stuff up in Aspen, Colorado, where I knew her. My wife was friends with her ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
Come over to the house for dinner. In person, she's all right to talk to, get along with. Her husband, who inherited the Amway fortune, was a little stuck up and righteous and a little pompous, but she was okay. Now, I don't think she really knows that much about education, but she was an enthusiast who wanted to do like you see on these commercials, save the dogs.
Right.
She was really into these things, like they had the Aspen Youth Experience, where these rich folk would put together a program, and they would go out and bring in Hispanic, Native American, and Black kids and show them another side of life. And they would keep up with them for years. And a lot of them went through college. A lot of them did military careers, came out okay.
Mm-hmm.
Program was great, but then they tried to co-opt it for a gay thing, and then it just fell apart.
Mm.
You know, so I'll say she worked conscientiously and zealously in that. But I know her personally. I mean, I don't know her well,
Mm-hmm.
but she sat up at my dinner table and eating dinner.
Wow. I know her brother is also Eric Prince, the guy who founded Blackwater, the mercenary group. And he's like
Well,
a crusader type.
but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let's get to Blackwater.
Mm-hmm.
Blackwater has another name now, but
Right.
Halliburton bought a controlling interest in it. So that's a Bush family thing now. And one of the things that they do is they manufacture this Rhino vehicle that costs $500,000 for a 12-foot high truck
Mm.
that in any other environment other than the Middle East would make an ideal target for a 125 millimeter Russian tank gun from miles away, and $1 million worth of equipment put in. So you got $1.5 million truck.
Wow.
With, I don't understand why they didn't take the M2 Bradleys, reopen the production line and make an austere version with no turret. To do the same thing, that would have been a better deal, I'm thinking, since the Bradleys they have are practically all worn out and they haven't made any new ones in a quarter of a century. So, la-di-da, whoop-de-doo.
I know,
That's the way to make money.
yeah, it's interesting. I saw when Gorbachev, they had the doomsday clock thing last week, and Gorbachev, I thought he was dead. He up there with Thatcher and Reagan and Pope John Paul. He the only one left. He was talking about how war was imminent in the next several months. And what's your take on that? Are we going to get into a big war?
I doubt it.
Okay.
There's nothing for any party to get a gain on it. And there are already so many surrogates who are so happy to duke it out with one or the other of the superpowers behind them.
Mm. And also, let me ask you. Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Judge.
Go ahead.
Now I'm going to ask you something different from that, but go ahead. You was finishing your thought.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about the white woman march. I call it the Women's March. The protest Trump. I'm kind of confused by white women because they voted for him in overwhelming numbers, but yet they're protesting.
No. Change that.
Okay.
The white feminists are protesting. The white women supported him because he's manly.
Mm.
You get this nonsense in the media. You've seen it where everybody is so sissified.
Right.
And a man is something to be downed, Even in the action hero thing, they kiss each other and they vigorously rub each other's butts. And you've seen the new Kentucky Fried commercial where extra crispy Colonel pats the football player on the butt over and over again, and you've got the feminists who hate Trump, and you've got a lot of white women said, we want a real man in there.
Mm.
Now, you see, what's going on, too, is there is a nationwide backlash against feminism. They don't tell you about it, but most of the news pundits, they hang around for wine and cheese and their little in crowd, and they'll occasionally interview somebody and go, tut, tut, tut. But see, they're at 35,000 feet in the 757 going coast to coast or from one big city to another, and all the rest of these people they don't have contact with are 35,000 feet below in what they call flyover country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like to show you, we talked about this too. What did you see when you saw the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March? How many men did you see?
Saw mostly women.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that was supposed to be the Million Man March anniversary, but you saw women.
Right.
You have the Women's March, but I assure you that's mostly those that lean to the left and are feminists.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those good old boys, women folk, they don't like that other side.
Mm. But it's like to me that white women to get people in trouble for some reason. It's funny how they are able to galvanize and organize the way they do about certain things. And I think about Jack Johnson. There should be more white women that were concerned about the partner of Jack Johnson to me because he loved white women. But then we found out last week, according to this historian, that he interviewed Carolyn Bryant of the Emmett Till story, and she said she lied about the whole thing. So what's your take about that?
You get the idea that maybe somebody needs to be a little circumspect with Down and Bill Cosby in the face of that revelation.
I agree.
Reminder, hint, hint, hint.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take down a black man in America, what do? You accuse him of a sexual impropriety.
Wow.
A lot of times, though, you get a preacher involved. Nobody pays attention because black folk expect their preachers to be dallying around a little bit with the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're talking about Jackson Sr. was messing around with the white ladies. They thought that was going to be a big bombshell. Nobody black batted an eyelash. Well, he's a preacher. We thought he was doing it anyway.
What about Bishop Eddie Long, though? What's your take on him?
What about it?
I mean, like, he passed away and, people accuse him of things, doing things with young black boys or teenagers. And I saw his funeral. It was kind of conflicting to me because, his nickname was Big Daddy. So, I mean, people telling these stories, like they knew him since they were teenagers. They used to have apple pies together. I'm thinking, like, it was like some Pizzagate coded word stuff because of the way he was portrayed in the media at the end. And, he was a gifted and charismatic preacher. And, his church site was still a big church. I know Deion Sanders got up there and said that Bishop Eddie Long taught him how to be a man, even though he was already a grown man when he met Bishop Long. So I'm just kind of conflicted about the legacy of Eddie Long, just from what
I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't talked to anybody that's a witness.
Mm-hmm.
And I always am circumspect about taking what the media has to say about sexual impropriety.
Mm-hmm.
You got the Catholic Church, you got the Southern Baptist Church, you've got all sorts of allegations against Christian sex generally, certain preachers, and, I don't know. It bothers me. You go in churches and the music minister is gay. You got all these little gay boys prancing around up on stage, tippy-toeing, not in rhythm with the music.
Mm-hmm.
And then somehow or another, this is going on in the churches because I know some of these sisters are dallying with the good reverends.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of brothers don't want to have anything to do with the church because their ladies or their wives or girlfriends are giving up the money to the preacher and listening to him and won't pay the least bit of attention to their husband or their man. We've got a big schism, a love-hate thing about churches in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Could happen. Is it happening? I don't know.
That was a good point. I want to ask you about, from a legal perspective with Carolyn Bryant with the Emmett Till thing, because I had read several sources that said that she was actually there that night that they kidnapped Emmett from his great uncle's home. And even Most Right, his great uncle, said that he heard a woman's voice. And according to several articles in Jet Magazine from '56, they said that he actually said that Carolyn Bryant was there that night and that they actually issued a warrant or whatever for her back then, but they never served her with it. And
it was for a material witness.
Okay. So, I mean, should she be held liable now, though? I mean, anything could be done from a legal point of view.
Do you actually think you're going to get a grand jury to indict her now, 60 years after the fact? 50 years, 60 years.
Well, they opened the case back in 2005, and they almost came close, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, they might, but what do you got? An 80-year-old woman,
right?
90-year-old woman.
Yeah, she in the 80s. She definitely in the 80s. I found out too that ex-husband Roy Bryant, who killed Emmett Till, they're telling me that the governor of Mississippi now is his nephew, Phil Bryant. He was born December 9th, 1954. But that's
They're
his
all
nephew.
connected.
Mm-hmm.
They're all connected. But you see, or not all, that's an overstatement, but a lot of them are connected.
Well, you talking about the bloodlines. Like, yeah, I agree with you.
But you get somebody in the family gets the foot in the public door, and then a relative will come in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, the Kennedys, Kennedy ad nauseum.
Right.
Bush, you know, they were even trying to get Jeb Bush in there, which, you know, if it was left to me, they ought to ban close relatives from being president of the United States,
mm-hmm.
or spouses.
Mm.
You know, let's get that out the way. Though they've had a few, like Adams, John Quincy Adams, and, you know, son and father and son, the Adams father and son thing,
right.
the Bush's father and son, the Roosevelt's uncle and nephew bit, the Kennedys, you know, they couldn't quite pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
The old man was a gangster, so
right.
Maybe that's just what goes around comes around. He was responsible for killing all those folks. Maybe it just came back on his family.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very fascinating. Yeah. Well, actually, just like we talked about, black leadership, like the lack of black leadership, and we talked about, from a White House point of view, when Abraham Lincoln was around, he had Frederick Douglass, or even the Kennedy and Johnson administrations had Dr. King, and even Clinton had, I guess, Jesse Jackson. But is Omarosa, is she the new black leadership now? That's how black leadership looks in America when it comes to the White House.
Oh, like who are you saying?
Omarosa. Is she the closest thing we have to a black leader with an ear that has a connection to the White House, like how Al Sharpton had a connection to the Obama administration?
That's none of the above for black leaders. Black leaders are where you can independently influence members of your race and have some input in how they think and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, give you an example. Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was beloved by a series of American presidents because he told the black man to be satisfied with where you are. Pick up the pail and be the best floor mopper you can be. Don't try to be a businessman. Don't try to get a college education. Just be where you are. Be content with your life. And maybe someday one of your great-grandchildren will be able to get up out of the broom closet and go someplace else. That's what we have. And George Washington Carver, they castrated him. Some white people adopted him. They had a cute little daughter, so to protect her, as soon as they adopted him, they castrated George Washington Carver.
Mm-hmm.
So he had no balls, literally.
Right.
But he smart scientist, apparently. But, they do that to us. Mm-hmm. Al Sharpton used to be James Brown's boyfriend, so what's Al Sharpton done? James Brown got him to start with Don Cornelius and Soul Train and let him speak. So what has he done? He's got a history of taking wild positions on stuff without checking it out and proved to be very badly wrong. Walking around all those years with his hair fried. What did Malcolm X say about it? The great Malcolm X, a processed head equals a processed mind. So there you go.
Wow. Somebody did I know it's been a big debate in the black community, online, about should black folks be concerned about everybody else's problems? Like, even with this immigration ban, a lot of black folks were critical of getting involved in certain things because a lot of black folks feel that nobody's looking out for the interests of black people right now. And
well, yes, we should. What's right is right and wrong is wrong, and it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help to be completely selfish in your outlook. Besides, when you set a precedent that it's all right to do something to one group, you can do it to another. And you can do it the other way around. If it's wrong for one group, it's wrong for other ones. Like, most people don't know this. For the first half of the 20th century, there were no civil rights laws. The Constitution, 14th, 15th Amendment, were applied to corporate entities, which were fictional people, not the descendants of black slaves.
mm-hmm.
And what we got our rights from was the ASPCA laws, Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. If you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro. So the Jewish community started sponsoring Negroes through the NAACP and financed it under the guise of this theory. If you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro. If you couldn't do it to a Negro, you certainly couldn't do it to a Jew. So they used us to advance their rights. And the theory was, is if you had all of these good things that you had to do for dogs, you certainly had to do it for Negroes.
Wow.
See, that's how tenuous it's actually been.
Wow.
So be careful what you're unconcerned about.
But where, like, you look at the fact that people are looking at the fact, like some black folks are saying that, hey, how is it that so many different organizations and groups are able to galvanize around and support these, people that are affected by this immigration ban? And you look at what happened during inauguration weekend when so many, women were able to organize and bring attention to certain things. And you look at black folks catching hell even under 8 years of Obama, the increased, violations of black folks' human rights in Ferguson and Baltimore and all over the country. So you don't feel like, people that don't want to get involved, they don't want to be on the front lines, don't have a right not to be on the front line. All things considered about how black folks have been getting treated in the last, I would say, 20 years. Yeah. Hello, Judge. Are you there?
Yeah, a little phone problem there.
I was going about to wrap it up anyway, but I was actually like, a lot of people are concerned, black people, because you look at how, like you look at the inauguration weekend where so many women, white feminists came out, they were able to organize a strong response to the Trump administration. Then you look at what happened this past weekend with the Muslim immigration ban, how so many groups and people in influential places were able to speak out and organize and get results about that. And black folks saying, look at all our woes and problems, and we don't really have a friend. Like we talked about this before about the lack of political allies for black people. So is it wrong for black folks to say, let me be a little bit more apprehensive and take care of myself first? Be more self-preservation oriented.
That's not a good thing. Have you ever heard the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
Yes, sir.
See, I don't know if he is our enemy, but some of the forces and factions that he represents certainly are. So he's making a lot of enemies. And if we had good leadership, we would engineer some coalitions between the enemies and turn it to everyone's mutual benefit. You see, like an English parliamentary government, the majority party gets to pick the prime minister, but sometimes there's no majority, so they have to set up coalitions. We need to set up coalitions. Right here in Shelby County, 38% of the population is Hispanic. We don't even know that, do we?
No.
See, 19.1% of the registered voters in Memphis are white, and 24.8 in the county are white. But, you look at this other thing, we've got a majority of the people in the county and the city are black, but that still is a gap, and that gap is Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of coalition have we been setting up or not setting up with Hispanics who have some of the same, joint interests that we do?
Yeah, I mean, you make some good points. I mean, there's lack of leadership, lack of having a think tank, lack of a lot of things, lack of planning, and just planning to fail. It sounds like for 4 more years.
See, like, look at what happened with this thing in the summer where the people marched across the bridge.
Right.
Well, okay, we got some cooperation from our current director of police. He got out there to see that the white police didn't get out of control and start an incident. We got a lot of community interest, but then a number of black preachers co-opted the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, when they had the meetings, it was all angling on, you need to come to my church so you can hear me preach and put money in the collection plate, and we need to run this. Well, this isn't, this isn't what we wanted. No thanks. So every time we get something going on, you get a collection of black preachers vying to see who's going to take control of it.
Right.
And then when they take control, it's basically who's going to come to my church and contribute to my collection plate. But you on a national level, we don't have any Stokely Browns, we don't have any Malcolm X's. We don't have any of the non-media selected people. See, Dr. King was a darling of the media.
Mm-hmm.
But Malcolm X was not. But at least my generation, Malcolm X had a more profound influence than Martin Luther King did.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly H. Rap Brown had an influence on the youth in the 60s. You see, Huey P. Newton was a little crazy. I knew him. He used to walk in places talking about he could whip anybody in the place, and finally somebody killed him. Eldridge Cleaver, he drank too doggone much, and he was still a con, and, he still thought like one. Angela Davis, unfortunately, would put you to sleep after 5 minutes, and she was a personal friend. Nice woman, but, I took a class from her. She told me to. I wanted to get a good grade for no cost, but I went and did it. It's just you'd have a hard time staying awake past 5 minutes. Good, beautiful sister.
Mm-hmm.
But, we haven't had any black leadership in a long time. What, millennials, where is the leadership? Where is the leadership? The young folks in college, where are they? Who's going to jump up and raise hell on a college campus? I see they had something of a lightweight riot in Berkeley, on the Berkeley campus of UC Berkeley behind Breitbart's, that crazy young 30-something-year-old neo-Nazi that they brought in to speak by the campus Republicans.
Right.
And they had to cancel that. UCLA canceled him, that the young Republicans brought in. By the way, Hillary was president of the young Republican chapter. She was bringing Tricky Dick Nixon around the college campuses to talk. You have to understand that, too.
Mm-hmm.
See, and if you want to do something that scared the hell out of people, when LBJ said he was not going to run and Hubert Humphrey lost out to Tricky Dick Nixon, everybody was predicting doom and gloom.
Wow.
And see, how many people know that Hubert Humphrey, for example, was an Alpha Phi Alpha?
Mm-hmm.
He got made as an undergrad back in the 30s. You got to be a badass white boy to get made from black frat in the 30s.
That's interesting. Wow.
When they were swinging serious wood.
Mm-hmm.
But, you can't tell. But I think Trump is very good for the country so he can actually see what's going on and there being a veil where everything goes on behind the veil. and only something nice comes out. You see, everybody, black people, he was just so vulgar. Oh, come on. You let your boys and your daughters play all this cussing and hollering, bitches and hoes and MFs and this, that, and the other thing on rap video, and on the music, you don't go play it, you bounce to it in the clubs. Now, what you worried about somebody being a crude white boy?
Right.
I'm
makes
not.
sense.
Some of the people he's put up there, are cranks. But let's see what it really is. And next time, start trying to do something in front instead of saying, "Oh, we're going to give Michelle Obama." Oh, give me a break. That's like, what's the sister they want to put on the $20 bill?
Harriet Tubman.
Okay, nice sister. She got 250 folk to freedom. I guess I helped them go through the Underground Railroad. But what about Frederick Douglass? You see, that's this thing. The feminists want a woman so bad they pick the system. So now you got black folk behind the game to get Harriet Tubman wearing a head rag on a $20 bill. Put Brother Frederick Douglass on there. You see, get a black man. That's where we need some examples. Brothers are getting down so bad by everything. And you can tell the status of a race or an ethnic group by the status of its menfolk. And look, you've got a precedent. Ben Franklin was not a president. Well, there you go. You got Frederick Douglass. He certainly had an impact on whether or not there was going to be a civil war and what happened to the black man in America at that time. That was somebody that made and shook opinions nationally and internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get Frederick Douglass on a bill.
Well, not Obama, Donald Trump did bring up Frederick Douglass for some reason. He did bring him up. Yeah.
And by the way, he made some promises to black folk. He's been keeping everybody else's promises. Let's see if he keeps the ones he made to us. He said he's going to do something about education. Mm-hmm. Some of that stuff that sounds ridiculous about what he says he's going to do in Chicago, there are a lot of people in Chicago that are just saying, come on, do it. I'm tired of not being able to walk out of my house.
Right. That's going to be interesting. I definitely got to get your point of view when it happens, because I guess it's going to happen, because he's been doing everything he says he's going to do, or been attempting to do so.
But see, Hillary didn't promise anything. Barack Obama didn't promise anything. He just said, help is on the way. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we would have got nothing delivered, did get nothing delivered. George Wacko Bush made his family even better off than it was before. He did that for somebody. And see, I think Trump's personal agenda is he's got a filthy rich Jewish son-in-law, and he's setting up alliances to make his family part of the new aristocracy, or on top of it. He's a TV celebrity, and then what was waiting in the wings if he hadn't won. He would have taken control of the media side of things that Fox now runs.
Yeah.
Since Rupert Murdoch dropped out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got a plan. What's out? We don't even have a black leadership, because I think social media has been used and manipulated to down every brother that you got out there. You find out something bad about him, and they start pushing that. And then, the media will cut out all of the black folk. They wanted to get Cosby to start a new network. And, they chop that. And now you hear about the white woman saying that she lied about EmMEtt Till.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then everybody's afraid. I don't want to rock the boat, They might retaliate again. Hell, they're going to do it anyway. Right. So do you want to be a dog with a pink or a blue ribbon tied around your neck and get kibbles and bits? Or do you want to be a wolf?
Mm. I see what they did in NBC. They got rid of all them black people and brought in Megyn Kelly from Fox. It's something about her I don't trust. I guess I know why now.
Megan Kelly,
yeah.
come on now. What did she have to commend herself? She wasn't particularly erudite. She wasn't particularly knowledgeable. She wasn't particularly personable. What did she have going for herself? She was a feminist. Or at least one that tasked for that on the right-wing side. I mean, look at what do we have on CNN?
Don Lemon?
Don Lemon. CBS, Don Lemon. Ask somebody on the streets who Don Lemon is. Who do we have on CBS?
Gayle King, I think.
And
on CBS?
In other words, what does she contribute to the black cause?
That's a good question, yeah. She Oprah's friend, best friend.
And by the way, what does Oprah contribute to the black cause?
That's a good question.
She has a whole lot about justifying dysfunctionality and glorifying it, and getting people get up there to down men and to have the audience get in a good cathartic cry.
Now, when you start thinking about these things, kind of you get people depressed. You start thinking about the reality of our situation as black people.
For 15 years to start talking about what's right, what's wrong, man up, do what you're supposed to do. But CBS couldn't take that anymore, and they canned me. We couldn't come to a contract for a meeting of the minds, so they wanted to get rid of me. Had for years. They hated me.
Wow.
And, I couldn't even get the local folk to sit there and back me up with this, talk to the Democratic Party for the last 8-9 years about these voting machine problems. They didn't want to listen. So I actually got about 70% of the doggone vote, but guess what? It's me and that witch Amy Wyrick running for DA. But they had 5 candidate numbers in the machine for DA. So they have 22,000 votes that went to 3 candidate numbers who don't represent any candidates.
Wow.
They even tried to fix it up. So they had 0.875 hundredths of a person doing a write-in vote. Now it's a fraction of a person write-in vote. It's got to be at least one.
Wow, that's really insanity. But Judge, we'll wrap it up. I really enjoyed talking to you as always. A lot of people love your commentary and insight and perspective. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we end this segment?
Yeah, it's just keep your eyes open as to what's going on now. If you're astonished, it's just because you're getting a chance to see it. Next time around, 4 years away from whenever, be aware of what's happening, pay attention, get involved in the political process and get control. The Democratic Party needs to be burnt to the ground, and you need a phoenix rising from the ashes. So let's focus. Let's get it together. Stop watching so much sports and pay attention to reality, all right? It's about whether you keep your mortgage, whether you can keep paying your car note, whether your kids get to college, whether you can afford to go to college, whether you get a good job, whether you keep your job. So let's be about our business.
Thank you so much, Judge. And also, what's the best way for people to reach out to you? Because I know you're on social media now.
Well, yeah, you can comment on that. I have posted in about a week. I was seeing how it matched out. I picked up a few followers, I guess, but give a few comments. That's Judge Joe Brown TV.
On Twitter, yeah, definitely. We'll definitely be promoting it as well on our networks and outlets. Thank you so much, Judge. And the words of Great Skelton, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.
All right, Brother Hurd. Keep up the good work. Do it, man.
Yes, sir. God bless.
Okay. Ciao.